Commander Jack Davis stood at the window of Earth's Space Defense Command Center, his face grim. Through the reinforced glass, he watched as hundreds of alien ships moved into position around Earth. Each vessel was massive, the size of a small city, and shaped like smooth metallic diamonds that reflected the sunlight in blinding flashes. "How many are there now?" Davis asked, his voice tight. Lieutenant Anna Reed checked her screen. 423, sir. They've formed a complete sphere around Earth. Nothing gets in or out without their permission. Davis rubbed his tired eyes. Just 3 days ago, Earth had been celebrating the launch of its newest Mars colony ship. Now, the planet was effectively imprisoned by the most powerful fleet humans had ever seen. The main screen flickered to life, showing the stern face of an alien. Its skin was pale blue with ridges where eyebrows would be on a human. This was Admiral Krell, the commander of the blockade fleet. "People of Earth," Krell said, his English perfect but oddly flat. "The Galactic Council has made its decision. Your species has been deemed too unpredictable and potentially dangerous for free interaction with galactic society. This containment action is not negotiable. Any attempt to breach the blockade will be met with immediate force." Davis stepped forward. "Admiral Krell, we've shown no hostility toward your council. We didn't even know you existed until your fleet arrived. How can you judge us without even giving us a chance?" Krell's expression didn't change. "We have observed your kind for centuries. Your history is filled with war. Your literature glorifies conflict. Your rapid technological advancement without corresponding moral evolution presents an unacceptable risk." "So what happens now?" Davis demanded. "You just keep us prisoners on our own planet forever." "Not forever," Krell replied. "In perhaps 1,000 years, your case will be reviewed. Until then, you may continue your civilization within the confines of your world. The blockade will remain." The screen went dark. President Helen Torres slammed her fist on the conference table. Around her sat the leaders of Earth's major nations and military commanders, including Davis. "We have colonies on Mars and Europa that will run out of supplies in months," she said. "Our economy depends on asteroid mining. This blockade will destroy us. Our best weapons couldn't even scratch their smallest ships," General Wu reported. "A military solution is impossible. There must be something we can do," Torres insisted. Davis glanced at the woman sitting quietly at the end of the table. "Dr. Morgan, you've been analyzing their technology. Any insights?" Dr. Emma Morgan looked up from her tablet. Unlike the military officers in their crisp uniforms, she wore a simple lab coat over jeans. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Their technology is at least 3 centuries ahead of ours," she said. "But they're not gods. They follow predictable patterns in their patrol routes. They're efficient but rigid." "Meaning?" Torres asked. "They think they know exactly what we're capable of, and they've designed their blockade accordingly," Morgan replied. "That could be a weakness." Davis nodded. "I want you to find any gap in their defenses, no matter how small. We need options." That evening, hundreds of miles away, Tom Reynolds stood in his private observatory. Once a celebrated astronaut, he now spent his retirement tracking stars and satellites from his mountain home. Tonight, however, his telescope was aimed at the alien ships. "Now that's interesting," he muttered to himself. Reynolds had been mapping the positions of the blockade ships for 2 days straight. As he plotted their locations on his computer, a pattern began to emerge. He recognized it from somewhere. Not from his time in space, but from earlier. Before becoming an astronaut, Reynolds had been a Navy man. The alien formation reminded him of an old naval blockade technique, just adapted for 3-dimensional space. He reached for his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Emma, it's Tom Reynolds. I think I found something about those alien ships you should see." The next morning, Dr. Morgan arrived at Reynolds Observatory, her government car kicking up dust on the rural road. "This better be good, Tom," she said as she entered. "I've got the fate of humanity on my schedule today." Reynolds grinned, his weathered face crinkling around the eyes. Still no sense of humor, I see. Come look at this. He led her to his computer display, showing a 3D model of Earth with the alien ships represented as glowing dots. See anything familiar? He asked. Morgan studied the pattern. They've positioned themselves to maximize coverage. Standard containment protocol. Exactly, Reynolds said. But it's not just any containment. It's a specific formation. When I was in the Navy, we called it the fishnet. It's designed to catch large vessels trying to run a blockade. Tom, these are aliens. Why would they use human naval tactics? Reynolds shook his head. Not human tactics. Efficient tactics. There are only so many ways to blockade a sphere effectively. But here's the thing about the fishnet. He zoomed in on the display. It has holes. Small ones, designed to let the little fish through while catching the big ones. Morgan's eyes widened as understanding dawned. They're expecting us to try escaping with large ships, colony vessels, or military craft. Yes, Reynolds nodded. They're not worried about small objects. Their sensors are probably calibrated to ignore anything below a certain size. How small? Morgan asked. That's the problem, Reynolds said. Based on their positioning, anything capable of carrying humans and life support would still be detected. Morgan was quiet for a moment, then pulled out her phone. I need to make a call. There's a project at the government's Black Mesa facility you need to know about. Deep beneath the Nevada desert, Davis followed Dr. Morgan and Reynolds through a security checkpoint. Beyond it lay a hangar so vast its far wall was barely visible. In the center sat what appeared to be an alien craft, sleek and silvery, about the size of a bus. What am I looking at? Davis asked. We call it the Visitor, Morgan explained. It crashed in Arizona in 2019. We've kept it secret even from most of the government. We've been reverse engineering what we could, but its technology is challenging. What have you learned? Reynolds asked, examining the craft with professional interest. Not as much as we'd like, Morgan admitted, but we understand their detection systems. They use a quantum field that interacts with mass and energy. That's how they spot ships trying to run the blockade. Davis frowned. So how does this help us? Because the field has to reset every 6 hours, Morgan said. There's a 3-second window where their sensors go dark. Too brief for any normal escape attempt. But if we had ships small enough and knew exactly when and where to move, Reynolds began. We might squeeze through, Morgan finished. Davis stared at the alien craft, his mind racing with possibilities. 3 seconds to slip past an alien blockade. It's not much of a chance. It's the only chance we've got, Morgan replied. Before Davis could respond, his secure phone buzzed. The message made his blood run cold. What is it? Morgan asked, seeing his expression change. It's the Mars colony, Davis said. They've run out of oxygen. The blockade is already killing our people. Reynolds and Morgan exchanged a look that mixed determination with fear. Then we better work fast, Reynolds said. Humanity doesn't have much time. The emergency meeting room at Space Defense Command buzzed with tension. Projected on the wall was a live feed from the Mars colony, showing people in thin spacesuits trying to conserve their remaining oxygen. We have maybe 2 weeks before they all die, Dr. Morgan said, pointing to the grim data on her tablet. And our Europa base reports similar shortages. Commander Davis paced the room. We need to find a way through that blockade, fast. Tom Reynolds stood by the wall display, studying the movement patterns of the alien ships. He had mapped their positions over the past 5 days, creating a time-lapse that showed their regular patrol routes. Look here, Reynolds said, pointing to specific spots in the alien formation. Every 6 hours, exactly on schedule, there's a slight shift in their positions. Dr. Morgan nodded. That matches when their detection field resets, creating those 3-second blind spots. But 3 seconds isn't enough time to fly a ship through, Davis argued. Even our fastest craft would only move a few miles in that time. The room fell silent until a voice spoke from the doorway. What if the ships were already positioned at the edge of the blind spot, ready to move at exactly the right moment? Everyone turned to see a tall man in an expensive suit. His security badge identified him as James Walker, CEO of Walker Aerospace. Davis frowned. "Who authorized you to be here?" President Torres stepped in behind Walker. "I did. Mr. Walker's company has been working on something that might help us." Walker moved to the center of the room with the confidence of someone used to commanding attention. He placed a small device on the table that projected a hologram of a strange-looking spacecraft. "This is the Hummingbird," Walker explained. "It's small, about the size of a minivan, but it can carry up to 8 people in emergency conditions. Most importantly, it uses very little metal and has minimal energy signatures." "How would that help?" Reynolds asked. "The alien sensors detect mass and energy," Morgan reminded them. "A ship this small might register as space debris." Walker smiled. "Exactly. But here's the real breakthrough." He touched the hologram, which zoomed in to show the ship's unusual engine system. "We call it a compression drive. It temporarily compresses the matter of the ship and everyone inside it by about 40% for a short duration, just long enough to pass through the blockade's blind spot." Davis looked skeptical. "Compress matter? Is that even possible?" "Theoretically, yes," Morgan said, studying the design with growing excitement. "By manipulating the space between atoms, you could temporarily reduce an object's physical dimensions without changing its mass." "We've tested it on cargo and small animals," Walker said. "It works, but only for about 5 seconds before the compression field becomes unstable." 5 seconds, Reynolds mused. Just enough time to slip through during the 3-second sensor gap, with a small margin for error. Davis still looked doubtful. "What happens to the people inside during compression?" Walker's expression grew serious. "It's uncomfortable. Painful, actually. But our tests show it's survivable." President Torres stepped forward. "How quickly can you build these ships?" "I've already started," Walker admitted. "I have 10 prototypes ready now, and my factories can produce about 20 per day if given emergency priority." Davis stared at the hologram, his mind racing. "Even with these ships, we'd need to know the exact location and timing of each blind spot in the blockade." Reynolds gestured to his mapping data. "I'm working on it. The aliens are creatures of habit. Their patrol patterns are predictable. But we need more information about their sensor technology," Morgan added. "I need to get back to the visitor craft and run more tests." 3 days later, Dr. Morgan worked late into the night at the Black Mesa facility. The alien visitor craft had been partially dismantled as she and her team tried to understand its complex systems. Morgan rubbed her tired eyes. She had barely slept since the meeting with Walker. The Mars colony had already lost 3 people to oxygen deprivation, and Earth's global economy was showing signs of collapse as space-based resources became unavailable. "Dr. Morgan," called one of her assistants, "I think we found something." Morgan hurried over to where a young scientist was examining the alien craft's sensor array under a powerful microscope. "The quantum field doesn't just detect objects," the assistant explained. "It actually creates a kind of snapshot of space every few microseconds. During the reset, it compares the new snapshot with the previous one to identify movement." Morgan's eyes widened. "That means if an object moves only during the reset period, it might not register as having moved at all." She immediately called Davis and Reynolds to share the discovery. Meanwhile, at Walker's private facility hidden in the Rocky Mountains, the first test of a fully operational Hummingbird was about to begin. Walker stood in the control room, watching through reinforced glass as 2 test pilots entered the small craft. Both were volunteers who understood the risks. "Compression drive charging," announced a technician. 80%, 90%, ready for activation." Walker took a deep breath. "Activate compression." The Hummingbird seemed to shimmer for a moment, then suddenly shrunk by nearly half its size. the metal of the hull visibly condensed, becoming darker and denser. Inside, the test pilots' voices came through the radio, strained with pain. Compression. Successful, one managed to say. It hurts, like being squeezed all over. But where? Functional. Walker watched the countdown timer. 4 seconds, 5 seconds. At exactly 5 seconds, the ship suddenly expanded back to its normal size with a loud cracking sound. Alarms blared as the craft's hull developed several small fractures. The pilots were alive but shaken. One had a nosebleed, the other was vomiting. "We need to stabilize the expansion phase," Walker muttered, making notes. But the compression worked. Back at Space Defense Command, Reynolds had mapped every patrol route of the alien blockade. Using Morgan's data about the sensor resets, he identified potential escape corridors, places where ships might slip through during the blind spots. Davis studied the map with growing hope. "So we position Walker's ships at these exact coordinates, activate the compression drives at the precise moment, and they might make it through." "In theory, yes," Reynolds said. "But we'd need a way to coordinate dozens of ships launching simultaneously from different locations around the planet. And we'd need a diversion," Morgan added, joining them. "Something to keep the aliens' attention focused elsewhere during the attempt." Davis nodded slowly, a plan forming in his mind. A diversion. Like a direct attack on their command ship. "That would be suicide," Reynolds warned. "Not if the attack isn't meant to succeed," Davis replied grimly. "Just to distract." Morgan looked at the map again, her expression troubled. "Even if this works, the ships can only carry a small number of people. Who gets to escape?" The question hung in the air. The fate of humanity might rest on who they chose to send through the blockade. "The best and brightest," Davis finally said. "Scientists, engineers, doctors, people who can establish a new human colony somewhere beyond the Council's reach." Reynolds nodded slowly. "And maybe someday they'll find a way to come back for the rest of us." Outside the window, one of the massive alien ships passed overhead, its shadow briefly darkening the room, a reminder of the overwhelming odds they faced. But for the first time since the blockade began, they had a plan. A dangerous, desperate plan, but a plan nonetheless. 1 week after Walker's first successful test, world leaders gathered in a secret underground bunker. The room was filled with tension as President Torres called the meeting to order. "The situation is getting worse," she began. "Our Mars colony has lost 12 people. Our global economy is failing. We need to decide now if we're going forward with Operation Exodus." Commander Davis stood and presented the plan they had developed. "We've identified 26 gaps in the blockade where the Hummingbird ships might slip through during the aliens' sensor reset periods," he explained, pointing to a holographic map. "Walker has built 40 ships so far, each capable of carrying 8 people. 320 people, the Chinese president said. Out of 8 billion. How do we choose?" Davis took a deep breath. "Each nation will select candidates based on skills needed for colony survival. Doctors, engineers, farmers, geneticists. We need people who can build a new human settlement and eventually come back for the rest of us." The room erupted in arguments. Some leaders demanded more seats for their countries. Others questioned if the plan could work at all. "Enough," Torres shouted, silencing the room. "We vote now. Operation Exodus, yes or no?" The vote was close. 8 yes, 7 no. "Then it's decided," Torres said. "We launch in 3 days." At Walker's Mountain facility, the chosen passengers arrived in small groups to avoid detection. Dr. Morgan supervised their training, teaching them how to endure the painful compression process. "It will feel like your entire body is being squeezed in a vice," she explained to a group of pale-faced scientists. "You'll have trouble breathing. Your vision will blur, but it only lasts 5 seconds, and you must stay conscious to operate the ship once you're through the blockade." A young doctor raised her hand. "What's on the other side? Where are we going?" Morgan pointed to a star map. Your ships will be programmed with coordinates for Proxima Centauri. It has a potentially habitable planet. The journey will take 4 years in cryosleep. And if we make it, said an engineer, what then? How do we help Earth? First, survive, Morgan replied. Then build. Eventually, find allies. The Galactic Council can't be the only power out there. Meanwhile, Reynolds trained the pilots using simulators that replicated the exact conditions they would face. The timing must be perfect, he stressed. Too early, and you'll be detected before the blind spot forms. Too late, and you'll still be in range when their sensors come back online. One pilot, a former Air Force captain named Miller, asked the question on everyone's mind. What are our chances, really? Reynolds looked him in the eye. If everything goes perfectly, maybe 60%. But we've built in redundancies. Not every ship needs to make it through for the mission to succeed. Miller nodded grimly. So some of us are decoys. We're all taking the same risk, Reynolds said. But yes, some ships will likely draw fire so others can escape. In the command center, Davis finalized plans for the diversionary attack. A small fleet of Earth's best military spacecraft would launch a direct assault on Admiral Krell's command ship. It's a suicide mission, General Wu warned. Not necessarily, Davis replied. They'll break off the attack as soon as we confirm the hummingbirds are through. The goal is distraction, not victory. And you're leading this attack yourself? Wu asked. Davis nodded. I wouldn't ask anyone to take a risk I wouldn't take myself. Just then, an aide rushed in. Commander, we've detected unusual movement in the alien fleet. On the main screen, several blockade ships were shifting position, strengthening the formation in the southern hemisphere. They know something's up, Davis muttered. We need to move up the timetable. Alert Walker and Reynolds. We launch tonight. As darkness fell, final preparations were made across the globe. The 40 Hummingbird ships were positioned at carefully selected launch sites, hidden from alien sensors by being kept inside specially designed hangars. In Walker's main facility, passengers boarded their assigned ships with minimal belongings, just what was essential for starting a new colony. Walker himself supervised the loading of critical supplies, seed banks, medical equipment, digital libraries containing humanity's knowledge. Each ship has a quantum entanglement communicator, he explained to Morgan. Once they're established, they can contact Earth without the aliens detecting the signal. Morgan looked troubled. James, there's something I need to tell you. I've been assigned to Hummingbird 7. Walker's face fell. You're going. I thought you'd stay to continue the research here. They need me more out there, she said. But we need you here, building more ships in secret. This can't be our only attempt. Before Walker could respond, Reynolds burst into the room. We have a problem, he said urgently. My last scan shows increased alien activity. They've added patrol ships to 4 of our planned exit points. Walker checked the data. That leaves us 22 gaps instead of 26. Worse, Reynolds continued. I think they're onto us. One of their ships is heading directly for this facility. Morgan's heart raced. How? How could they know? We've suspected they might have spies, Walker said grimly. Human collaborators who think they'll be rewarded for helping the Council. We need to launch now, Reynolds insisted. Before they find this place. Walker hit the facility-wide alarm. All ships, immediate launch. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Across the compound, pilots and passengers scrambled into their ships. Training took over as they rushed through pre-launch checks. In Hummingbird 7, Morgan strapped herself into her seat, fighting back fear as the ship's engines hummed to life. On the command deck, Reynolds coordinated with Davis. Diversion fleet, are you ready? Ready and launching now, Davis replied. Good luck, Tom. See you on the other side. Outside, Earth's military ships roared into the sky, deliberately making themselves visible on alien sensors. As predicted, the blockade ships began to move, responding to the apparent threat. Now, Reynolds shouted into his communicator. All hummingbirds, launch now. 40 small ships rose silently from hidden locations around the world, their stealth systems making them nearly invisible against the night sky. As they approached the blockade's edge, pilots watched their timers count down to the crucial moment when the alien sensors would reset. Prepare compression drives, Walker instructed from his command center. Activate on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. Aboard Hummingbird 7, Morgan gasped as the compression field activated. It felt like every cell in her body was being crushed. Through watering eyes, she saw the ship's interior shrink around her. The pain was almost unbearable, but she fought to stay conscious. Outside, the first wave of hummingbirds reached the blockade just as the alien sensors went dark for their 3-second reset. The tiny, compressed ships slipped through the gaps in the formation, mere specks against the vastness of space. Whether they would all make it through, whether the plan would succeed, no one knew. But humanity had made its move against the Galactic Council's blockade. The most daring escape in human history had begun. The pain of compression made Captain Miller's vision blur as Hummingbird 12 sailed through the narrow gap in the alien blockade. His co-pilot, a young woman named Lisa, gripped her controls with white knuckles. Neither spoke. It took all their concentration just to stay conscious. 5 seconds felt like forever. Then, with a sudden jolt, the compression field failed. The ship expanded back to its normal size, throwing everyone against their restraints. Status. Miller gasped, wiping blood from his nose. Lisa checked her instruments. We made it through. We're past the blockade. Similar scenes played out in other Hummingbird ships as they slipped through different gaps in the alien formation. Some passed through easily. Others weren't so lucky. Hummingbird 23 activated its compression, drive a fraction of a second too late. As it expanded on the other side of the gap, an alien patrol ship detected the energy surge. A beam of blinding light shot out, and the human vessel disappeared in a flash of superheated particles. Hummingbird 35 suffered a compression field failure halfway through. The ship suddenly expanded while still inside the blockade, triggering every alien sensor in the area. 3 council ships converged on it instantly. But for every ship that was caught, 4 more slipped through undetected. Aboard Admiral Krell's command vessel, alarms were sounding. "What is happening?" Krell demanded, his normally calm voice rising. "The humans are attacking," Admiral reported, his second-in-command. "Multiple Earth vessels approaching our southern perimeter." On the main screen, Earth's military ships advanced in a tight formation, weapons firing uselessly against the Council's superior shields. "A pitiful gesture," Krell said with contempt. "Destroy them." "Wait," said another officer, studying a different screen. "We're detecting unusual energy signatures, small and scattered. Some kind of distortion." Krell's eyes narrowed. "Show me." The screen switched to show tiny blips appearing and disappearing at various points around the blockade. "What are those?" Krell demanded. "Unknown, Admiral. Too small to be ships carrying living beings. Possibly debris or sensor malfunctions during the reset cycle." Krell wasn't convinced. "Extend sensor range to maximum. Track those anomalies." In Earth's orbit, Commander Davis led the diversionary attack, pushing his flagship directly toward Krell's command ship. "Keep their attention on us," he ordered his fleet. "Every second counts." His communication officer reported, "Sir, we're receiving encoded signals. 32 hummingbirds have cleared the blockade. 5 destroyed. 3 unaccounted for." Davis felt a mix of triumph and sorrow. Lives had been lost, but the mission was succeeding. Then his radar operator called out, "Commander, the alien ships are breaking formation. They're starting to scan for the hummingbirds." They figured it out, Davis realized. "All ships, maximum thrust. We need to draw their fire." His fleet surged forward, launching every weapon they had at the alien command ship. It was like throwing stones at a tank. But it worked. The Council ships turned their attention back to the attacking Earth fleet. "Prepare to retreat on my mark," Davis said. "Our job is done." At Walker's facility, Reynolds monitored the escaping ships, his face tense as he watched the tracking system. "Hummingbird 7, report status." He called into his communicator. Dr. Morgan's strained voice came through. "Compression successful. We're through the blockade. Minor injuries, but everyone's alive." Walker stood behind Reynolds, watching the display with mixed emotions. Each green dot represented a ship that had successfully escaped. Each red dot showed one that had been destroyed. "They're doing it," Walker said softly. "They're actually breaking through." Reynolds nodded. 35 ships confirmed beyond the blockade now. Over 250 people. A technician rushed into the room. "Sir, we have a problem. An alien ship has landed 1 mile from the facility perimeter." Walker turned to his security chief. "Initiate destruct sequence. Nothing can remain for them to find." "But sir," the security chief protested, "all our research, the prototype ships. Destroy it all," Walker ordered. "We can't let them learn how we beat their blockade." In space, the Hummingbird ships that had cleared the blockade were activating their long-range engines, preparing for the journey to Proxima Centauri. In Hummingbird 7, Dr. Morgan tended to the injured while the pilots set their course. "How many made it?" asked one of the passengers, a geneticist named Robert. "Not all," Morgan admitted, "but enough. The human race will continue beyond Earth." The ship's communication system crackled. "All Hummingbirds, this is Captain Miller on 12. Form up on me. We'll travel together as far as Jupiter, then split into 3 groups as planned." As the ships regrouped, they received one final transmission from Earth. It was Commander Davis. "This is Davis. The diversion worked, but the aliens are onto us. They're scanning for you now. Get as far from the solar system as you can. Don't look back. Your mission now is to survive, to build, and someday to return. Earth will be waiting." Davis out. Morgan touched the communication panel. "Commander, what about you? Your fleet?" There was a long pause before Davis replied. "We took heavy losses. We're retreating now, but we've done our part. Good luck, Doctor. Make us proud out there." The transmission ended. Through the viewport, Morgan could see Earth growing smaller as their ship accelerated away from the solar system. Somewhere on that blue marble, Davis, Walker, Reynolds, and billions of others would continue to live under the alien blockade. "We will come back," she whispered. "Somehow, we will find a way back." On his command ship, Admiral Krell reviewed the battle data with growing suspicion. "The energy signatures were concentrated at points where our sensor grid resets," he observed. "The humans knew about the blind spots." "Impossible," his officer protested. "Their technology is centuries behind ours." "Never underestimate desperation," Krell replied. "Have the patrol ships found anything escaping the blockade?" "No, Admiral. If anything got through, it was too small to detect or too far away by now." Krell stared at the image of Earth on his screen. Tighten the blockade. Double the patrol ships. No more blind spots. He had a feeling that the humans had achieved something today, though he couldn't prove it. The Council would not be pleased. As Earth receded behind them, the 35 Hummingbird ships carried humanity's hope into the depths of space. Each person aboard knew they might never see Earth again. Their journey would be long and dangerous, their destination uncertain. But they had done the impossible. They had slipped through the fingers of the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. The first step of Operation Exodus was complete. Now came the harder part: surviving, building, and finding a way to someday free Earth from its prison. 4 years passed on Earth. The alien blockade remained tight, with no blind spots left to exploit. Resources grew scarce as the planet was cut off from its space colonies and mining operations. Many countries fell into economic depression. Commander Davis had been promoted to Admiral after the breakout operation. Though many lives had been lost in the diversionary attack, The escape of the Hummingbird ships was considered a secret victory, known only to a handful of world leaders and key scientists. Davis stood at the window of his office, watching an alien patrol ship glide silently across the night sky. Behind him, Walker and Reynolds studied a secure tablet. "Still no sign they know what really happened," Davis said. "They've tightened the blockade, but they still think it was just a failed attack." "What they don't know," Walker replied, "is that we've been busy these past 4 years." On the tablet was a schematic for a new type of ship, smaller than the Hummingbirds but with an improved compression drive. "How many have you built?" Davis asked. "Only 3 so far," Walker admitted. "Without proper facilities, we've had to work in abandoned mines, hidden bunkers. But they're ready." Reynolds looked up from the tablet. "We still don't know if any of the original ships made it to Proxima Centauri. The quantum entanglement communicators were supposed to signal us once they arrived." "If they survived," Davis said grimly. At that moment, the tablet emitted a soft tone. All 3 men froze. "Is that?" Walker began. Reynolds tapped the screen. A message appeared, short and simple, but enough to make their hearts race. "We made it. Not alone. Friends found. Coming home. Prepare." Nearly 4 light-years away, on a small rocky planet orbiting Proxima Centauri, a new human settlement had taken root. Solar collectors gleamed in the reddish light of the dim star. Dome-shaped buildings dotted the landscape, connected by enclosed walkways. Fields of genetically modified crops thrived in specially designed greenhouses. In the largest building, Dr. Morgan stood before a group of 30 alien visitors. They looked nothing like the Galactic Council species. These beings were tall and slender with iridescent skin that shifted colors as they moved. They called themselves the Lumina. "Our allies are in position," said the Lumina leader, Thal. "The Council has no idea we've been helping you." Morgan nodded. "Our people on Earth have built 3 more ships. They'll launch when we give the signal." "And our fleet?" asked Captain Miller, who had become the military leader of the human colony. Thal's skin flashed blue with determination. 200 ships, hiding in the shadow of your Jupiter. The Council believes this area is simply a refueling outpost for our merchants." Morgan activated a holographic display showing Earth's solar system. "The Council still has over 400 ships blockading Earth. Even with your help, we're outnumbered." "Numbers aren't everything," Thal replied. "The Council has grown complacent. They've ruled the galaxy for too long without challenge." Miller studied the hologram. "If we coordinate our attack with the launch of the new ships from Earth, we could create enough confusion to break the blockade." "And then?" asked Robert the geneticist, now a colony leader. Morgan's face hardened. "Then we free Earth. All of Earth." Back on Earth, preparations accelerated after receiving the message from Proxima Centauri. Walker's underground facilities worked day and night, secretly building more ships while Davis created a new diversion plan. President Torres, now in her 2nd term, held an emergency meeting with world leaders. "The message confirms what we hoped," she told them. "Our people survived and have found allies. They're coming back to break the blockade." "When?" asked the Russian president. "We don't know exactly," Torres admitted, "but we need to be ready. Each nation must select candidates for the next wave of ships." The Chinese president looked skeptical. "How do we know these Lumina aren't just another threat? We'd be trading one alien master for another." Davis stepped forward. "The Council imprisoned us without provocation. These new aliens are offering freedom. I believe we should take that chance." As the leaders debated, Walker received another message on his secure tablet. His eyes widened as he read it. "They're coming," he announced. "The attack begins in 3 days." Aboard his flagship, Admiral Krell received troubling reports. "Unusual activity detected near Jupiter, Admiral," his officer reported. "Lumina trading vessels are gathering there." "How many?" Krell asked. "At least 50, sir," possibly more hiding in the planet's radiation belt where our sensors are less effective. Krell considered this information. The Lumina were a peaceful race, known for trading, but not for military action. Still, this many ships in one place was unusual. "Keep monitoring them," he ordered, "and increase patrols around Earth. Something feels wrong." The day of the attack dawned like any other. On Earth, Walker's 3 new ships were hidden in remote locations, ready to launch. Davis prepared a small fleet of decoy ships, not enough to seem like a serious attack, just enough to pull attention in the wrong direction. In space, hidden behind Jupiter, the Lumina fleet powered up their weapons, advanced technology that the Council had never seen before. And approaching from deep space, 30 Hummingbird ships that had survived the journey to Proxima Centauri returned, piloted by humans who had left their new colony in the hands of those who remained behind. Dr. Morgan stood on the bridge of the lead ship, now heavily modified with Lumina technology. Beside her was Thal, whose skin rippled with anticipation. "Are you ready to see your home again?" Thal asked. Morgan nodded. "More than ready, but it won't truly be home until it's free." The fleet began its approach to Earth, staying outside sensor range. Their plan was complex but clear. The Lumina would attack the Council's main command ships, the returning Hummingbirds would target the patrol vessels, and in the chaos, Walker's new ships would escape Earth carrying key scientists and leaders. "All ships, prepare for light speed," Captain Miller ordered from the fleet's command vessel. "Engage on my mark." The ship's engines glowed brightly as they prepared to make the final jump to Earth. "For humanity," Miller said. 3, 2, 1. Mark. The fleet vanished into light speed, racing toward the final battle for Earth's freedom. On Earth, Davis watched the sky, knowing what was coming but unable to see it yet. His communicator beeped with a simple message from Walker. "They're here." Davis smiled for the first time in years. "Launch the decoys," he ordered his team. "Let's give our friends the distraction they need." As Earth's small fleet rose into the atmosphere, the sky suddenly lit up with weapons fire far above them. The Lumina fleet had arrived and was engaging the Council blockade. The aliens were caught completely by surprise. Their orderly formation broke as they scrambled to respond to attacks coming from multiple directions. "Now," Davis ordered. "Tell Walker to launch now." High above Earth, Krell's command ship shuddered under the impact of Lumina weapons. Alarms blared as systems failed throughout the vessel. "How is this possible?" Krell demanded. "The Lumina are not a warrior race." "Admiral," his officer called out in panic, "we're detecting the same energy signatures from 4 years ago. The ones that escaped the blockade. They've returned." Krell finally understood. The humans. They found allies. For the first time, fear showed in his eyes. "Contact the Council. Tell them we need reinforcements." But it was too late. The Council fleet, accustomed to displaying power rather than using it, was falling into disarray under the coordinated attack. As the battle raged in orbit, Walker's 3 ships slipped away from Earth, carrying their precious human cargo. And from his command center, Walker sent one final message to all ships. "Operation Homecoming successful. Earth will be free. Humanity's borders are now the stars themselves."